Okay, so we should be recording week one, BIM 1040 virtual class. So welcome. I hope you've enjoyed the start of this course. I think it's just kind of bear with us as we bear with each other, because this is the first offering of the course. So everything is new for all of us, but it just makes it all kind of exciting, which I think. What I was hoping is to go through some intros first. And then kind of I'll do a quick overview of the course as a whole, and then we'll just jump into this week one session. Does that sound good?
Yes, sir.
All right. So why don't you guys give me an overview, just quick of yourself. I see you guys added to the discussion board, which is awesome. So obviously the first one was this. Just getting you guys the intro, just an expansion a bit on what you guys happen to write here, just to help me to better understand your backgrounds. So maybe, Victor, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I've been in Canada for 1 year. I previously did the Green Architecture program. Before that, I graduated in Brazil from Architecture and Urban Design, my bachelor's I did there. And I have used, as I said, I used BIM at school, especially for modeling and energy analysis purposes.
Okay. And what software are you familiar with? Which BIM software?
We use the Revit energy analysis, but we also tried to use Sapphire.
Cool.
It was, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Ben?
Yeah, I started architectural technology at Algonquin about 5 years ago. That summer I had started a landscape business, so I was in school for 2 years and did my architectural technician. Took 2 years off, and then this past year I went back for my third year. We primarily used Revit as just a 3D modeling and drafting tool. And
So it was even before it was called BIM. So it's kind of cool. I'm an architect by trade, graduated from the University of Toronto back in 2002. And I would always get yelled at by my professors because I was doing all of this weird techie stuff instead of wanting to draft. So I always remember that, getting yelled at because I didn't want to use the drafting boards and all that. Started with, exploring softwares when it was AutoCAD Architectural Desktop that got product molded into Autodesk Architecture, I think it's called now. My first entrance into a full BIM authoring suite was actually on the Bentley end. So I was delivering BIM projects when I was at CH2M Hill for about 13 years, all through the Bentley applications first, focusing on heavy industrial plants. And then I decided, you know what, I better learn this Revit thing because everybody's talking about Revit. So I did that about 2009, maybe 2010. I had some awesome experience with the London Olympics, and that kind of opened my eyes to, dealing with data, integrating with GIS, so Geographic Information Systems, public stakeholder meetings, exposure of what the government wanted the public to see versus what the private saw. For design technology, and for the last 2.5 years, it's been, similar, but focusing on all of our sectors, buildings and infrastructure, how to do BIM, so what you're BIMing and why you're BIMing it and who you're doing it for and how to reach your delivery and how to bring all the things together. So that's a bit about me. Love talking. I love presenting at events. So have either of you been at an event where I've been speaking?
No,
sorry, you go for it.
I haven't, but I just watched your YouTube clip that you posted on Blackboard there.
Awesome.
Yeah, same.
Cool. Yeah, no, it was funny. We made some hires at George Brown just last year, from George Brown College for student interns. And when I interviewed all 4 of them, all of them had seen me present somewhere in the last year. And HR looked at me and said, "What the hell, Brent? How do these? Everybody knows you, right?" So no, it's good because at least I know. The worst thing is that there's obviously you reuse a lot of material and ideas. So at least you haven't already seen some of the stuff, which is good. Okay, so the course as a whole, my course versus the entire program, you will see, hopefully, you'll see the synergies across the various streams. So like the tools, the collaborations, the standards, the fundamentals. We kind of interweave common threads across them all. Most likely everything delivered with a bit of a different twist because we're all unique in how we do our delivery. The weekly materials, so I do have the 14 weeks already lined up for you guys. Slowly I'll expose them. So I think I just opened up week 2 just today, about a half hour ago. So I'll try to do that prior to the session on the Friday. I will open up the next week's session. So then at the end, we can just look to see what the requirements are and some of the ideas. I have made I think some pretty awesome assignments. Depending on how much stuff you guys have convoluted at the same time, you may or may not agree, but for me, it's just about the thinking behind them. So in each week, I'll expose these when they come, and we got some funky things that got copied. I'll edit out that gibberish that got translated over, but so I have them all built, all designed there. So when they become exposed, then that'll be part of that hybrid portion of the course. Would be either like this week, go in the discussion board and throw a couple ideas down for discussion purposes in the live session, and then the assignments would be taking up the rest. I do have the quizzes created as well in the exam, so they'll pop themselves open as in due time. Very quickly, I'll go to the where are we? The CSI here. So the CSI kind of walks through. So if you haven't had a look at that, just have a quick overview, but this will tell you when the quizzes, the assignments will expose themselves and some of the focus items. So my hope is that the in-class sessions, I'll expand upon the ideas that I've defined in the outcomes. And my hope is that the hybrid portion just exposes you to maybe the concepts or gets you to say, what's he talking about? What is this about? Maybe give you a hint of something to look at in some of the hybrid courses. So you look at it. There's no right or wrong. I think that's a very important thing. Like the BIM myths you guys threw on. First of all, they're awesome. So we'll talk about those afterwards. But nothing would have been incorrect. It's just my hope is to just stimulate idea in the 2-hour portion. So the self-directed portion, and then have dialogue about it when we do the live session. And then each one of these will follow. I do have at the end, we've got presentations that kind of take what was done in the previous assignments and fuse them together for us to present and have something developed. With 4 of you in the course, I was hoping to do it as a group, so I would most likely team you up just in pairs. So it would just, the idea there is you're doing these assignments in isolation, and then part of the joy of BIM is that whether you want to or not, you got to work with other people. So I was going to fuse together 2 of you, and based on what was developed in those assignments, you guys kind of merge together, come to solutions, and produce something for dialogue purposes and presentation. And that's it. I elected to not go to any specific readings. So the resources that I have listed, and I'll just pop open the week one here. The resources listed in all of the weeks are all optional resources. I elected to have no required reading, no required purchases. So in that CSI, I think I had to put a whole list here. Sorry, I'm kind of flopping back and forth here. Maybe that, yeah, there we go. So required reading, nothing. So I could only imagine, you know, the burden that's played. And I remember at U of T, everything I had to read, the relevance of it, you put it all into question. All of this provided material make an appearance at some point throughout the week. It would either be infused, referenced in the hybrid portion or in the live, and the reference material, have a look at it. It's all good stuff. So maybe just a quick example of that. I think in next week's requirements, when we get to there, I provided links, live links to where I want you to put stuff, and I added reference material live in the online activity itself. So everything you need is at your fingertips in the Blackboard, and there's no ruffling around trying to figure out what's Brent talking about, what did you want us to do? So does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So what we'll do then, so for the in-class portion, again, these are estimates. If I don't take out the full 2 hours, I won't lose any sleep, and I'm sure you won't either. I'm going to go through the presentation. You know, I'd like to keep it interactive because we're a small enough group. So if you have any question or anything pops up, just stop me in the middle of the presentation. What I'm hoping to do is just to give really that fundamental overview of where my brain sits when I talk about BIM overall. And then hopefully you'll see the tie into why I asked you guys to throw some myths up. I also have myths I'll put up as well, because that, you know, I think one of the biggest problems in the industry is you go and say the word BIM, and that's riddles with preconceived notions, myths, lack of understanding, misunderstanding, misrepresentation, you name it, and then it causes the conflicts or the difficulties that we have when we're trying to have some fun. So with that said, let me start the week one. And as I said, interactive, whatever you guys. So, and yeah, that's the other thing. With this being virtual, first off, I apologize for not being there in Ottawa, but I do this within IBI all the time. You know, they don't send me everywhere I'm presenting. So let's make this work as well as we can. And, you know, if, I guess, treat me the way you would any of us are standing in the room in front of you, okay? And just have that comfort level. I'm pretty easygoing. You know, nobody will hurt my feelings or anything like that. So, all right. So the introduction. So BIM, you can Google it. You'll get so much about it. Varying definitions. Understand that it was a term that was coined around 2005, and it's kind of morphed its way into what we have today. So I always like to make people understand that BIM is both a noun and a verb. The first definition there being that verb of involving the generation and management of digital representations of physical and functional characteristics of places. So which can be exchanged, networked, and to help to support the decision making. And that's the critical thing, right? BIM is not Revit. BIM is not just the 3D model. The 3D model is important. How you create it is important, but it's that process. The noun of BIM is the item that helps us to make our decision. And the decision is depending what you're BIMing and why you're BIMing it. But there's so much that'll involve individuals, businesses, government agencies, plan, design, construct, and operate. So that entire life cycle of projects, but more importantly of assets and components. You'll hear me use the term assets a lot because I've been ingrained from the United Kingdom, I work on London, and really the focus of what we're trying to do is design the stuff that we have to manage throughout its life cycle. It can be applied in a scaled manner. So in the IBI world, we talk a lot about buildings versus linear infrastructure. And that, the I, the B, and the I stands for intelligence, buildings, and infrastructure. And I kind of like how that is because in our world where I work, that is the gambit of what we do. Linear items, vertical items, and systems that kind of couple everything together. That's what BIM is. It's all about data flow, connecting things. And then collaboration and planning are the critical aspects of how to achieve a successful BIM process. Now, BIM has existed, not called BIM, in other industries. So the concept of an information model to help plan in the medical world, that image on the left is actually my son. So he had to have significant head reconstruction surgery. And it's funny, when we were, the personal aspect, it's cool to introduce this. When we had to sit down and decide, yeah, we're going to do it, this is what they did. They gave me this initial BIM model to understand it. They rotated around. They had a surface scan, the CT scan, all fused together. They had information points showing what they were going to do. And then they redid the after scan showing the change. And you can see the curvature and everything. But as a parent, I sat down, no medical. I hate the sight of blood. That's why I'm in the building side. Buildings don't bleed blood. They bleed, not blood. And I completely understood what they were going to do, the process they were going to do, the interaction required by us, and all of the nuances that were going to occur. And for me, that's what I try to achieve as architect through my designs or through interactions throughout life cycles of assets. Getting the stakeholders to understand what's going to happen when they're not in the AEC industry. They're not designers, they're not contractors, but they're the ones who fund, replace, or use the assets that we build for them. This one, in one of my trips to London, a recent one, I was excited to see the BIM of the Gabeline Man in their in the natural history portion of the museum. And I was just walking up and I was just expecting to see pictures, and here's the interactive model. And I said, you got to be kidding me. They BIMmed it, and people were slicing sections, hitting components, pulling up data, and I was looking at that thinking, that's not Revit, that's not any of our authoring tools, but it is 100% BIM. So when we talk about those BIM myths, that term building has confused the industry quite heavily. But here they built an information model about the exhibit they had at play and provided an interactive medium within which the user can interact with the asset. And I said, how wonderful is that? In our world, I equate it to this. BIM is geometry plus data. And geometry can be the familiar building components at the bottom left, or at the top left, the blob, the anything that takes up physical space and has associated information to it. And the information I show on the right, that's just from something I had developed in, goodness, a decade ago, that it doesn't matter how much data. And that's where often people get lost is the minute you say BIM, if they accept the fact that, okay, it's about information, oh my God, I don't know the information. I don't know the manufacturer. I don't know the horsepower. I don't know anything. Therefore, we cannot do BIM. And it just has this convolution that explodes because there's software or there's questions or there's all of these things around what do we want to put in the model. And depending on where you are in the life cycle, it may not even matter. The other thing that gets lost is sometimes we get confined within what we're designing and we forget the fact that everything is geospatially connected. So this was one of my biggest lessons learned when I was on the London Olympics. This example here, you've got, if I'm designing the guardrail, I may just be focused on the bolts or the vertical supports or the impact resistance of the rail itself, acceptable deformation, at what speeds will it still be viable versus destroyed, but it is always an element, part of the bridge entity, part of the road facility, part of the overall network. And if you look in the room, like the room I'm sitting in right now, I'm on the couch in my basement, in my house, on a street, and you go from there. The street connected to the network with the various infrastructure, et cetera, macro to micro. There is always that connectivity of every single asset that we're touching and that exists. Focusing on buildings themselves. So I do spend a lot of time saying BIM is not just about buildings, but it is definitely equally, buildings do come into play. It's not just about, but it's definitely buildings encompassed by the BIM process. So when we look at from a traditional building perspective, it's not just about the architects. So I come in here and that's why I like showing electrical first, building mechanical, structural, architectural, and then they all come together. And that's only a small facet. You could have interiors, you can have acoustics, corrosion, specialty anything. Everything has to come together to form that whole. Here, then, you know, the building will connect to the site and everything, but just focusing on the design itself. Once we have that model, the BIM world says you can slice and dice it, produce what you need. You can get your list of materials. And again, that's usually I can click a button and understand what's in my model, provided it's modeled correctly. You get your clashes, and I love this example. The duct is hitting a beam, great. It's not going to fix that. And again, I noticed one of you put that as the myth. It's great. It will not, the BIM will not say, shift the duct, lift to the building. It won't do that. And I love when I engage with design professionals and they just say, well, we have this model. Why doesn't it just fix it? And then I'll say, okay, great. We'll lift the building by a foot and everything's happy. And then I say, well, we can't do that. And no kidding, we can't do that. Or I'll just say, look, we'll just remove the beam. We'll cut the beam. We'll cut the bottom flange of the beam and there's no more. So once they understand that, oh, wait a minute, it's not just a fix it. Something has to be designed in order to resolve the clash. And then we get our drawings. The president of IBI, his name is David Tom, he's recently been saying internally, we design information. The drawings are simply a representation of that data. To a BIM guy, I love it because that's exactly the point. Move beyond the world of CAD, which predominantly, CAD is a process in itself, but it was really the digitization of the drafting world, adding capability. In the BIM world, it's about information, it's about components, and the drawings will come. In the civil end, you still get drawings, but the concept of the plan and profile, saying you could have an alignment that varies and undulates along kilometers and kilometers of railway or roadway or buried infrastructure, and you get this auto generation plan and profile of your components. It's an awesome concept. So it's your detailing, but this is where the automation starts to come in. So it's auto generation from a different perspective. There's still spatial interferences. It could be the negative space of exterior. This is a shipping project I worked on. So there's still that type of thing. Utilities, grading, drainage, all of that stuff underground. I challenge all of those building projects where they say, well, we're just a Revit project. Well, that's good. You've got 5, 6 disciplines in Revit. Does your building float? Well, no, of course it doesn't. It sits on linear infrastructure. It connects to linear infrastructure, and that's how it connects to all of the networks at large. So those have to come together. Existing, new, and your drainage. So if you notice, and I like this example here because the building is a small little rectangle with a cube in the middle there, the influence of civil is a much vaster scale. And an old colleague of mine would always say, Brent, if you're an architect, you're doing vertical BIM, take your BIM, turn it on the side, scatter it across kilometers. That's my BIM. That's phenomenal. That's here, spot on. That's what it is. We've got the interchanges. We've got roundabouts, rail design. All of this is BIM. None of this are your traditional buildings. And then the laser LiDAR scanning, the Faro scan. There's a lot of entities now. It's come such a long way where these entities are not only bettering the technology and the quality of the point clouds themselves, but the ability to quickly produce and move from point data to information-rich BIMs. So that's some pretty phenomenal stuff. Then there's plants focus. Oh, sorry, go on.
What software were you showing us there? Was that all Revit?
This one.
No, the one before.
No, that's the beauty. We'll get to that in a moment, but yeah, basically, well, hold that question until I get to the software. But that's the beauty of it is, I would say the bulk of the stuff in this slide is not, sorry, in this presentation is maybe Revit's about 10%. So a lot of Bentley, a lot of ArchiCAD. The buildings one where I was showing electrical, mechanical, Struck, and Arc, those were Revit models from IBI. This here, for example, this is a schematic modeling tool on the Bentley side. But I got a softer side coming up, and that's again one of those other myths of, you know, how many different ways of it, right? On the plant side, so this was before coming to IBI Group. My introduction to BIM was this, and a lot of BIM managers or BIM professionals in the world, they don't realize that the heavy industrial were doing BIM long before it was coined by the AEC industry. So here we have just a simple schematic, and the gist of a schematic is every entity you put in here is rich with data. So very quickly here, you've got some pipelines. Can you guys see my mouse move when I move it? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, awesome, cool. So what happens here is I've got an input, pipelines, couple valves, so I can hit a valve, go along a pipe, hit a valve, and bypass or go through this entity. And then if I click on any one of these items, it gives me an exact list of all the components. The beauty about a schematic is by looking at this, you see, okay, Brent, I see 3 valves, I see this thing in the middle and a bunch of pipes. These 3 valves can be in different rooms, can be in different buildings. That's where the actual traditional model as you would envision it come into play. But the schematic here shows the process of going from A to B. If you continue along, it gets to this here, it says 2 sludge thickener. That could be something kilometers away. It makes no difference. So when you're working with these plant things, there's a lot of information that scatters it across potentially the globe. The schematic pulls that data together. There's also then little items that I didn't click on everything, but these things here, these could be, and I don't remember all the symbols offhand, but you can see this list here. You can have, you know, pipe reducers, etc., discrete inputs, electromagnetic flow meters. So there's all Then we come to the traditional model. So this model, just for your curiosity, this is modeled with Bentley's EcoSim tool for the structural and architectural, and OpenPlant Modeler for the plants. But every item in here, in the heavy plant, has data attached to it. And what we used to do is we would focus on an item. We enter some type of data. And that's, I noticed one of you put that myth there as well. not all the data gets jammed into the model. And that's 100% true. So this concept of life cycle information, the data has an identifier, and the identifier is your gluing mechanism to tie it to all the other potential sources or outputs of information that's obtained throughout the life cycle of the project. And it all comes full circle and has that mode of connectivity that then allows us to either build operational interfaces or build connecting ties to go back to understand what was designed and produced, what was actually installed, what's being operated, and what are those gluing mechanisms to tie everything together. Not every project goes to this extent by any means, but it's, you know, it's that aspiration of the more we can do that, the more connected our industries are. And then you get to that realm of smart cities, that realm of user connected information, and we can achieve that. So just pausing here for a second, you know, I'm doing a lot of work in IBI where we're actually talking about smart cities. Imagine, you know, when you go to the next class after me, what if you wanted to know, you know, where's your transit? You know, we already have Google Apps traffic route ability to plan our modes. But what if you wanted to interface with transit routes, have something waiting for you at the college? You mentioned you may not be able to get into the room if the prof isn't there. So why is everything so static and disconnected? The school knows you're in the course. They may know you're going to arrive. Why can't the physical infrastructure asset respond to the fact that students are going to come and have a more connected data backbone through Internet of Things, smart city infrastructure, so that the identification of you, the student, could potentially augment and adapt to the assets, the security behind the door, the accessibility, so all of that stuff, right? We're not there right now, but if we have connected information and seamless data for what's there, what it's connected to, how it's being operated, and how it's being used, that potential fusion could exist. And that's what I'm working on in my, you know, my day-to-day job. It's, you know, making BIM happen at IBI Group. So covering everything I just talked about right now in these slides, plus everything I just alluded to how to make us actually better the environment. To do that, we need to have software, share our data, etc. So coming back to the real world, you know, the world of BIM as it is today, most of the software out there, think of your Autodesk, Bentley, Graphisoft, DimensCheck, CATIA. There's all of these vendors out there that have different types of authoring tools, and they're broken for the most part into building, civil, and plant. They may be using different words, but the reason for that are there's common modeling practices and exchange or analytical routines built into those realms. So I'll explain that here. So I assume you're familiar with Revit. The message of this slide is it's not all just about Revit. So if you're thinking in the world of buildings, I could model in any one of these tools, and there's even others out there. Now, I think Susan in her class talked about the IFC, or introduced the Industry Foundation class. So there's the whole Building Smart Alliance came about maybe even a decade ago, because you know, you got to credit Autodesk. They're a marketing engine. They associated the application of Revit to the process of BIM. So the biggest myth, BIM and Revit is infused together. Everybody thinks, well, if you need to model, you just go to Revit. If we're doing buildings, okay, but understand that, and I've been on projects where sometimes 3 of these tools are at play. I could just give you one where I had structural was in EcoSim, architectural was in Revit, and ArchiCAD had MEP. They all came together. It's all okay, but it just adds for more complication. All good though. The beauty is though, like energy analysis tools like Sefaria or some of the other ones that are out there, the good ones will say, I don't care how you author the systems or the components, I will read them and analyze. Some tools are made just for Revit because Revit has the market share or the greater market share. Some tools are made just for EcoSim, etc. But the good ones say, I'll take in whatever you've modeled. Now, the problem comes when you're on the civil side and somebody says, well, I need to model the terrain. Well, Revit has the terrain button. I'll just do it in Revit. Keep in mind that's a building tool. So when we get into civil engineering, true cut fill analysis, delineation of subsurface gradation, buried utilities, buried pipe networks, gravity versus pressure. Then we start getting into the valves and the continuity of, flow streams and everything. That's not in Revit. That's very civil focused, and all the analytical capabilities of these tools, traffic managers, simulation, are all built to read civil-based tools with land XML integration, the ability to read DTMs, which are digital terrain models, and to pull that all together. Then on the plant end, these are very specific analytical pieces. So I would work on treatment plant models where it says, if I have a pipe that's 5 inches or a foot in diameter with this type of pressure, this type of material of this temperature flowing at this rate, will it burst? If I turn it 90 degrees, will the elbow burst? That's your pipe stress analysis. You can't do that if you're not using proper plant-based tools. And then this PID, process instrumentation diagram. Those are the diagrams I showed earlier. That integration of saying, hey, I've got 5 valves and a tank and 5 pipelines in this one little schematic. Scan my piping models. Do I have those same 5 valves? Do they have the same name, the same particulars, the same stuff identified as flowing through them so that they analyze properly? So there's all of that synergy between intelligent schematics and the piping models. In the building world, you may have seen schematics for electrical, like one-line diagrams for electrical wiring, or there's usually mechanical airflow schematics, but they don't do that great of a synergy like they do in the heavy plant world. I've seen airflow calcs, and they do calculate error loss, and that does happen with some of the built-in tools for Revit and EcoSim and ArchiCAD I've seen, but never to the extent of the plant tools. So, in the BIM world and in some of the assignments that'll come in the weeks to come, I know you're all coming in. My assumption was most likely you've all heard of and probably experienced Revit. That was the base assumption I took. And if you know any of the other authoring tools, bonus. But what I'm going to do in some of those assignments is I'm going to say, hey, how do you devise a solution, picking the right software based on these parameters? So you'll see those. And for me, and just keep in mind that like this course is about just, for me, generating thinking and getting you guys to say, well, you know what, it's more than just the one solution. What can be done? That's all it is. There'll be no wrong. I'm actually going to be intrigued to what you guys figure out. Because in the real world, I don't sit there and wave the magic wand and say, okay, it's going to be Revit, open plant, and Civil 3D. We're done. It all works. You got to go through the whole thing, everything we're going to be talking about through the next 13 weeks. What does the client want? What's the turnover? What are we doing internally? What's our skills and capabilities? What can talk to each other? Who are we sharing with? How many consultants, et cetera, et cetera. It just goes on and on and on. But once I know what I'm going to do, we get that collection of software, and then we wrap it, what I say, around the platform. I don't dwell on hardware. For me, it's, whatever we're doing, wherever you're going to be working, if you're using Revit, you're going to buy systems that can run Revit. If you're going to use SmartPlant, you're going to use Civil 3D. It's always the same rubbish I've heard everywhere I've worked. I'm open Revit and my computer crashed. You find out the computer's 5 years old. You raise the issue, get a new computer, and it's all good. So whatever. Critical for me is that top portion. So either AutoCAD or MicroStation. It's just an export process. But there's this convolution of, oh my God, what do we do? That's the whole point of the BIM manager. We'll tell you what to do. And then there's the diligence of, well, now you better do it. How are we reviewing our models, interacting? How are we doing document and content collaboration? How are we sharing this stuff? That, for me, is probably the biggest question. Once I've determined what we're doing, how are we going to share it? Because most likely it won't be just the one office you sit in. Then what type of data do we need? And that, for me, is the fun part. And I was, 10 years ago on those London Olympics, I loved it. Where's the data going to the owner and where else? So in our projects in the States, I see often the owner wants something, but the Department of Transportation says, get it into our GIS system, for example. And then us BIM managers say, okay, I've dealt with how we're modeling, I've dealt with how we're sharing, I've now determined what I'm delivering to the owner, I've determined if there's any other requirements to other stakeholders, utility companies, local ratepayers who are community groups that are affected by the project, et cetera, et cetera. And I've built the exchange mechanisms or designed the mechanisms, not necessarily, maybe you didn't necessarily maybe build a backbone, but I've defined what we're doing and how we're doing it, what we're BIMing, how we're BIMing it, know where we're going to start, where we're going to go, and then that all gets documented in this BIM execution plan. A lot of fun, very challenging, but I'm telling you, it makes life worth living sometimes. That's maybe an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. The other thing is interoperability. Sorry, do you have a question?
No, I was just Googling at your comment. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Cool. There's other reasons for life, trust me. I'm just kidding. But interoperability, that's the challenge. Because if you think of that software slide, there's a lot of software out there. And if you've done any work with just Autodesk products alone, and you've sat there saying, I'm in AutoCAD, and I can't reference Revit. I'm in Revit, and I can't reference the civil model easily. And I laugh with publish coordinates, share coordinates. Like, how complicated could you make things? And we know it's because Autodesk made AutoCAD, bought Revit, bought Navisworks, bought Inventor, makes them, they continue them all, but for goodness sake, they don't really talk. If you've done any work with Bentley, it's kind of different that they do have only one file format so everything can talk. And it's like, okay, that's kind of cool, but they're not the market share. So 10 years ago, or 11, maybe not 8 years ago, I made this slide where I said, I should be able to set up a project anywhere in the globe. We're all authoring a piece of the blob using multiple tools, Bentley, Autodesk. Integraph is an offshoot of people who used to work at Bentley, and they made the whole Smart Plant suite. Very expensive, ridiculously expensive, very good for plant modeling. Horrible in that it has a heavy SQL database backbone, and it usually ties you to one location. It's not cloud friendly, etc. Whatever. I should be able to model components, pull it all together, deliver the common data to my stakeholders, and from their perspective, they couldn't care less if it came out of Smart Plant, Revit, Civil 3D, Open Plant, MicroStation. Who cares? We're not there yet, but there's a lot of, when you hear us talk about open BIM, data synergy, interoperability, this diagram in my head is what that's all about. Bringing everything together, delivering it to a stakeholder. Because if you think, if you've done any reading or anything about smart cities and the Internet of Things, that's your data. That's your common data. So from its perspective, if I'm think of Google Home or intelligent lighting or smart thermostats, all of those things that are appearing in your house right now. They don't care if I use Revit, AutoCAD, or whatever to build or design the assets. They care that a light is a light, a switch is a switch. I can connect to the connecting power mechanism. An iPhone is an iPhone, and the user is the user. I have data connection to operate what was once an inert asset. And I love it, and we're going to get there for everything that we design. So we all like to eat, we all have to eat. Think of BIM as a cookbook. And I did this analogy a while ago. You know, if you think of it as a cookbook, a lot of various recipes which utilize different ingredients, and we got to cook something up. That's kind of what I just described in the previous thing. There's a lot of software, a lot of things we want to do, a lot of outputs, cook up the recipe. A lot of it is trial and error. So you'll have good recipes, bad recipes. The ones you're forced to do, so your mother-in-law says, cook this because it's the best, so you cook it. It's not really the best, but you do it anyway. You tuck it away and you remember, yep, I made it work. I may never want to do that again, but one day I may have to. Your mother-in-law might show up again, right? So it's that type of thing. You have those that are organized well, those that are not. And that's really how it is. And the example I use is I like to make homemade pasta when I have time. And that's just such a delicate balance of three simple things of, you know, oil, egg, flour. That's it. There's nothing more. But you put that ratio off anyway, it's disgusting. It just doesn't work. It's got to be in perfect balance and harmony to make that happen. And then the workflow, so the mix, the kneading, the refrigeration, the rolling, that entire workflow that would be defined in a BIM execution plan, which is like a recipe, has to be followed. I break the workflow, it's a disaster. It's kind of, it's all BIM. And when I cook, I think BIM, and that's disturbing. So then I say, well, I referenced, what are you BIMing and why are you BIMing it? That's what this kind of looks at, saying, okay, BIM gets convoluted and we want to try to do so much with it. But at the end of the day, when I say we do BIM on everything, this is what we do, especially in the design world. We get this model to bring these efficiencies to allow us to do the things we have to do. So when I hear BIM is too expensive, my response is rubbish. I'm not going to say, we're recording this. You could imagine some of the other words and responses I may give, but no, this is it. This is BIM. Then you start listening to the propaganda and you say, okay, well, you can cost attack, analyze, cost estimate. What does all of that mean and why would you do it? That's always the important thing, is the why. And then there's more and more things that can come into play. And, you know, in the course, the process of this course, you guys will be touching upon some of these. In the assignments, I may throw some of these out there where I'll be saying, the client says do X. And that's usually where the biggest challenge is. The vendors are smart. They've attacked the design industry. They've attacked the construction industry. They've built this momentum that is the BIM process. Owners are unique. They're not going to be designing. They don't care about Revit. So Autodesk and Bentley and all of the competitors, they've gone to the owners and they're not showing them how to model. You don't go to an owner and say, we'll teach you how to model a building. No, you have a building. We'll help you to scan your building, identify your assets, get them into a cloud-based system and start to feed that information back to your consultants. So all of a sudden, we're entering projects with pre-existing data and owners with expectations for stuff around all of these BIM uses. BIM execution plans basically say, these are what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. The recipe for success, if you go around here, each of these are equal, and notice I have scope there, the BIM execution plan, defining what you're BIMing and why you're BIMing it. But everything else around is important. Having the resources to model, the ability to collaborate. In the UK, they call that a common data environment. So we're making all of these models, these data-rich things. Where do we put them? Are they sitting on my computer? Because they'll die a quick death if they just sit on my computer. Ideally, they need connectivity to the stakeholders. We need to lead. And if one of the guidance or the reference materials or the Canadian which is why I wanted you guys to think about that. I threw this in here, these 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D. I hate this. I hate it because everybody has different interpretations of the Ds. But I put it here because I said, just understand that, 1D, 2D, it's like you're talking about BIM before you have models. And that's why I kind of like that approach to say, you know what, before I get to that 3D, having my Revit started, for example, you got to talk about what you're going to BIM and why you're going to BIM it. Set your goals, your uses, and your tools, know where you're going to go. Then you start modeling. And then when you get into the world of construction, you get your scheduling and your cost, and then it goes varying from there. So I don't want to dwell on the Ds because everybody has different. This slide I enjoy from the Autodesk perspective. They made this slide, and I kind of like it. I apologize for the formatting of it, from the word there, but it's that continuum. And if you think about data and assets, you start with, at some point, you come in, you design, you detail, you analyze, you document, you construct, then you operate and maintain, and you dwell, operation and maintenance on a project that might be designed and constructed in 5 years. The operation and maintenance could be 50 years. And at any point, you renovate, you replan, and you redo the cycle over and over and over again because specific assets within will be adjusted. And I love how they included the visualization. It's all about visualization of information, not creating renderings and animations and virtual reality. All of that is important. And in IBI, we actually have a huge, I lead a huge faceted group doing exactly that, renderings, animations, and advancements of VR. But right now it's a static segregation from the information. And part of my vision is to achieve user-based interaction with that data, to have that synergy into smart city, Internet of Things world, to actually start to influence data, and then have the VR, or more so the augmented or mixed reality technologies, to provide me the holographic interface to the data itself to allow something to occur. That's my world. That's what, as I said, that's why I love going to work, because that's what my focus is. And then bringing that to the realization at the project level to help further and advance efficiencies on achieving our BIM goals. So with that whole mouthful, oftentimes as BIM managers, you hear, or I've heard, that's great, Brent, but how does that help me today, right now? So when we put this little animation, I think we did this about 10 years ago and it still holds true today, that model and interact and, help enhance anything from design through tender into construction into operation. And the trick is understanding, again, what and why. We're going to talk later on in the course about legal aspects, and that's where it gets really interesting because we open the doors of the potential. Technically, everything you see here, everything I've talked about, it's all doable and feasible on every single project within the AEC industry. So with that said, why aren't we doing it, right? What's the barrier? And the legal parts will talk about the professionals, the liability, the honest fear, the contracts, etc. And then what owners define and how to actually facilitate all of this without pulling the rug under what it means to be professionals or working complementary to the restrictions of the professional legal entities. So I'm an architect by trade. I'm bound by the Architects Act. I'm licensed here in Ontario and in Alberta. So I have 2 Architects Acts, provincial legislation that governs how I act as an architect. Everything I do BIM will complement that. I always note areas of liability. So what can we do? Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I've heard only a few people say that they're an architect by trade. What does that mean exactly?
So that, yeah, I say that because I'm a certified BIM professional with the Canada BIM Council. I'm an architect by training, by education. So I've graduated architecture. I'm a licensed practicing architect. So when I say by trade, I'm not a structural engineer, not a mechanical engineer, I'm not a contractor. But when I talk BIM, I'm I will influence all of the, and I guess trade is an odd word to use, but when I say all of the trades in the life cycle of an asset, so BIM influences the architect, the engineer, the contractor, the owner, the operator, and everything between. Does that make sense?
You're the second prof that I've had say that, and I never asked the last one, so thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem. And, you know, it's interesting when you say, because usually when you hear tradesperson, it's usually related to the subcontractor. So in the construction world, the subcontractor calls the trades in, and the trades are the ones who do the actual construction work, if you will, right? But yeah, architect, I've noticed it actually more so in the BIM world with BIM professionals. I would go up and present, and I always say I'm an architect by trade because that's the aspect of the life cycle. You know, that's a good. I've never been asked that actually, so that's pretty cool. So this last portion here. So what we do in the BIM world. So when we talk about the BIM execution plan, you know, and in 2 weeks, I'll say have a look at the template and look at these BIM uses. And there's a couple of interesting on the hybrid portion of the course, just getting you to think about some of these BIM uses and what they mean. You know, they touch all of us. That, you know, oftentimes if I, as an architect, told, hey, you're an architect, do my cost estimation for me, do my phase planning. And then you sit back and you say, well, hold on a minute, why? And it's an interesting dialogue, and it happens often where they say, well, you have a BIM. So I've heard, take your Revit model and do X. Well, just because I have my Revit model doesn't mean I want to do that. So there's some interesting dialogues that occur around that. Level of detail, level of development, that's a term that comes up quite often. So have you guys heard of the LOD 300 or anything like that?
Yeah.
As I come up, yeah. So for me, I kind of, in order to rationalize it, kind of like LOD 100 is your schematic, 200 is more like a 60%, 300 is the relative comfort level for us designers. So as an architect, you say to me, give me an LOD 300 model. Pretty good, because I can do that. That's what I need to make my drawings. The higher you go, you're getting into 350 is shop drawing info, how it's going to be produced and procured. 400 is how it was constructed. 500 is how it's operated. So we're going to talk a lot about the trap there of not overcommitting. United Kingdom has a similar, of course, different terms, but similar concepts. You're going from stage 1 to 7, your brief to your operation. So there is a direct alignment to the level of definition, as they call it, in a model, to relative to what we're doing in the design words. So LOD 300 in North America matches to the level of definition or in the UK. Similar concepts though. And actually, sorry, and if you read those, what the model can be relied upon, like when I read that level 4, as an architect, I nod my head. Like, yeah, that's what I got to do. If I don't have a model that does that, my drawings are going to be horrible. But then as you start to get higher and higher, that's where the liability will start to kick in and say, well, hold on, an accurate record of the assets as constructed for handover. Are you asking me, the architect, to be liable for that? Is that part of my scope? Is there a different scope? And then that's where it comes into, as the BIM manager, we get pulled into what's my liability versus another entity's liability. Who should do this? I could do this, but am I doing it as an architect? Am I doing it as a technologist? And you start to get into all these dialogues, and then pure architectural entities step back and say, well, hold on a minute. I've got provincial legislation that says A, B, and C. I've got professional practices that are saying D and E. How does BIM fit in, and how do we make the BIM process complementary? Because there's a lot of actors at play when you go through this whole thing. I think this is the last slide. This is the NBS, National BIM. I always get that wrong. The National BIM Service, I think it is. whatever. I hope I got that right. But this is in the United Kingdom. A lot of work I've done there, you'll hear me reference often the UK's BIM execution plan versus North America's. The UK's BIM definition or the BIM standards, they have the standard 1192. North America doesn't really have one yet. NBS is kind of a supporter of the BIM process, and they released this periodic table that I thought it's a good thing to throw on here, because whether you agree with, you'll notice UK terms in here, and it doesn't matter if you agree with everything or not. The point is really in the middle here. BIM is about all of this, not just technology. And oftentimes that's where we'll jump straight to the technology. Revit can do A, B, and C. Good for Revit. What about all the other stuff that influences how to make BIM work? That's the point of today's session, is just to bring that to the forefront. Oh, I did have a couple more, sorry. So then, I'll keep alluding to the BIM execution plan. We're gonna dissect those a little bit, look at some differences between North America, UK. BIM goals, so at the project level, what are you BIMing? Why are you BIMing it? BIM uses, how are you gonna do that? So we want a BIM goal could be, I want a coordinated 3D model with limited true clashes. How are you going to do that? We're going to harness design authoring capabilities, design authoring use, clash detection use, probably visualization, a couple others. I'm going to harp on scope, schedule, and budget, because without understanding the fundamentals of project delivery, BIM fails. So when we're delivering this in IBI, we say, can't do more and expect to do it within the same schedule or the same scope, same schedule or the same budget. If I increase scope, you break the triangle without increasing the others and you fail. Or you say, well, I'm doing BIM, I'm going to BIM to such a high level of detail, my model quality will be phenomenally beautiful. Well, you've just exploded the triangle. Quality has to stay in balance with scope, schedule, and budget. So I'll say that over and over again, and the execution plan is meant to define how to do that. Next week, we're going to be talking about So we'll talk a bit about that. And I put up examples of the IBI plan. We'll see the industry standard plans, and we'll pull them all together. I remember this is the last slide. So then for me, it's all about the connection of digital streams. And this concept here, I talk about this a lot when I'm internal and external. We get stuck over here. So the world of Revit and all of the others. We're in here, we're building our content, we're confining ourselves to the capabilities of the software. So if you've worked with Revit Central Models and you've tried to share it globally in multiple entities, it's a treat in itself right there. But the concepts of generic BIM, so that's your open BIM standards, getting to IFC format, opening that data for other things to interact with, the realm of asset management. Once I'm in here managing the data associated to the assets, I can get into big data analytics, tying me to the Internet of Things, tying me to social and user interactions, allowing all of that to fuse together. And that's where we'll get to. And that's it. So that last slide there, for me, I guess if the takeaway from this portion of the class is, anything we delve into in the next 13 weeks, remember this, just remember that, the confining nature of the BIM authoring tools is actually hindering true application of the BIM process. And that I've seen throughout my lifespan in the BIM world. I remember on the London Olympics, there were 46 entities. It was great because I went in there. One entity was using Bentley, one was using Bentley Ecosim for its building, one was using Revit, one was using Civil 3D for the roads and bridges. And you just would pull them all into a room One had no clue how Revit worked. One had no clue how Bentley worked. And telling them, guys, your Olympic Stadium is going to sit on the site, and the paths that are being done by the civil guys have to connect to your entrances, and there's ramps, and all this stuff has to come together. And they would just look at each other saying, well, we don't use your software, therefore this can't work. And it was phenomenal to see that, and that was a decade ago for me. So, yeah. Questions, comments? Many different ways. And I think those are some of the things we'll explore. Again, it all depended on, what the authoring tools were and what I was trying to share. So, at CH2M Hill, when I worked there, we had a custom SQL database. And so this would be, now I'm talking, goodness, 15 years ago. So this was when nothing talked with anything else. So we said, okay, we're going to scan these data. All these tools are databases. An AutoCAD file is really a database, right? So we'd say scan these raw files, pull out A, B, and C. So as long as we defined the data we were looking for, we were able to start to pull information out. Then your Autodesk, Bentley, and Intergraph and others started saying, okay, we understand that we have to start to talk to each other. So they started making ISO standards around data. So this whole IFC file is governed by an ISO standard. They said, if you want to be declared ISO compliant, if I make a Revit model, I need to be able to export this file format and be recognized into this data structure. So suddenly I could export a Revit model and pull it into a Bentley application using IFC as a mechanism. Other modes are, we've got an internal asset management system. So as long as we know what we're looking for, we can start to glue data streams together. So there's no one answer, but that's where, and as a BIM manager, I love saying, you don't really need to know how to do it. You really need to know what you want to do. And one project I had maybe 7 years ago, I wanted a whole door schedule from models that were in three different platforms: ArchiCAD, Bentley's EcoSim, and Revit. A door is a door, and I said I want to look in these three apps and get this information out. If it had to go to an Excel sheets and then have the compare tool, combine tool, SQL database, etc., I was able to reach out or sub out to some scripters just to make it happen. But I knew I wanted doors and I wanted various pieces of data, so it was able to work.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments or? Okay. So what we'll do is, so normally I know in class, there's probably the break that would happen, but just for the sake of time, if you guys are cool, we'll just jump to the myth portion. It won't, might, and then we'll probably convene, close out, 15, 20 minutes early, if that's cool.
That's good.
Okay. So I asked you guys to throw up some myths. So I saw that you did, which is awesome. So what I was hoping is maybe, just so it's not me talking all the time, why don't you guys just quick blurb on what you guys wrote, and then I had a couple more that I'll add, and then we can just, we can go through them like that, if that's cool.
Yeah. Should I start?
Or do you want to go? Yep.
Yeah. So the first one was 3D model has to have all the information. That's something that you said, I believe. We don't have to model everything. We don't have to give all the information. We have to think about what information is needed and what information I'm gonna have to show to the stakeholders or to the client, to anyone. And then after that, I have to think how I'm gonna show the information to the person. So sometimes it's not needed to most of the times not to model everything. Uh, BIM is good for big firms. That was something that I heard a lot in Brazil. They thought it was expensive, it was not worth it, but uh, the moment you realize that you can make your life and other people's lives easier by using this one platform or the platform that connects to the other ones. Uh, yeah, that's it. And for design and construction, yeah, I think with the Internet of Things, with the other things that you talked about, I think BIM can also be used on the built environment. Like after construction, yeah, to like either manage the energy, like to see the energy consumption and to see the performance of a building or something. I think BIM is also really good for that. Too difficult to learn because a lot of people have BIM as this like I don't know, like hairy monster that you have no idea what's going on, and I had that as well, and it's becoming more clear to me, and it wasn't before. So hopefully, I'll be able to help those people as well change their idea about BIM. Yeah, and the too expensive to incorporate. I think it's not. If you invest the money on training, on changing the way you actually, I think people are not scared about the value, the money that they're going to spend, but they are usually just scared about change. And I think it's a good change. So like, people are not used to it. They are not used to sharing the files, sharing the information with every, like every person. But that's very important if you want to have a smart building, or if you want to do things smart.
Awesome. Good stuff. Ben?
Well, I don't know how in depth to go on this because you pretty much debunked all of it. But yeah,
just give just a quick overview of what you're on. I just want to. I like the dialogue, so just hearing your perspective, even if it was a perspective of why you put these down, right?
What? Oh, you want to know why I put these down?
Yeah, your perspective on your myths.
Okay, well, BIM is just 3D modeling. It was kind of just a filler, to be honest, to get to number 5. BIM takes too long. Now, I know that really just comes down to level of detail, right? How much you're going to put into it and what you need to take out of it. It all depends on what your program and goals are. BIM is just software, I suppose, would be debunked by the fact that you went over that there. It's almost like a lifestyle, I suppose one could say.
Cool.
As for clash detection, as you said, it doesn't solve it for you. It shows you where it might occur, but there has to be a design change. Now, clients don't know what to do with BIM data. Did you talk about that at all?
I alluded, but tell me your perspective. That's what I want to hear. Why you put that? Because it's good.
Well, I suppose I don't know what to do with BIM data to an extent. I don't know all the data that it puts out. Like, obviously, there's a model, and that's fantastic. We can all see and walk through it. now there's all those additional analysis and spreadsheets and so on that you can do, which I yet to fully understand, I suppose.
But yeah, but this is an important one because it is a myth in that, well, they don't know why. So actually, and I thought your first one was good too. So if you say BIM is just 3D, then people think, yeah, well, I can, the old AutoCAD days, right? Make a rectangle, extrude it. Yay, I just did BIM. Well, no, you got to say what it is and why it is, right? So that's the beauty of tools like Revit, where I don't make the rectangle and extrude it 3 meters. You press the wall and you say it's 3 meters high. So automatically there's this info. But then people will say, well, I don't have to say that the wall has this finish and then the finish has this maintenance requirement, and the client won't care. But it's a myth because I think I mentioned earlier, the Autodesk and Bentleys are attacking our clients to let them know, hey, there's this data rich, blah, blah, blah. Let me know what you do with data, or how do you maintain your buildings, and we'll tell you how BIM can help. So a lot of our building-based clients or infrastructure clients are starting to realize, hey, you know what, there's stuff out there. And I started in the world of plants. So, in 03, I got out of 02, I graduated, I got on this big wastewater treatment plant in Alexandria, Virginia. And the first thing they said was, here's the client's operational screen, make sure your models can feed this. I said, what the hell, what? What do you mean? How do I do that, right? So, and it was interesting that my first exposure to BIM was from a client that was 100% taking in data from the stuff we designed. We were trying to figure out how to make that data better represented in the world of 3D at the time, before it was called BIM. So that's pretty cool. So this is what I'm hoping for, the hybrid to the in-class, right? So in the hybrid side, just get you guys to think of some things. I do the session of whatever presentation I've put up there, and then have us just reflect on either what you put down prior, or if you put something down, then you hear me talk and you're like, oh crap, that's complete. I put something completely opposite from Brent said. That's good, because then that lets us have that dialogue as well to say, hey, after hearing you talk, I see whatever. So that's kind of the nature. The other thing I was going to quickly show here, this one wasn't uploaded into Blackboard, because after I made the hybrid portion of this week, I said, hold on a minute, I need to do this inside IBI. And I realized, well, I started talking with my CEO and I said, let me throw some of these myths at you. And then he said, yeah, those are myths, and everybody thinks that, Brent, whatever you're doing for Algonquin, why don't you do the same here? So I pulled together 14 quick myths, and I said, and my CEO said, don't make it complicated or you lose your audience. I said, fair enough. So I said, here, I pulled up this slide and I said, does that resonate to you? And my CEO said, yep. It's pretty clear, right? And this, for me, this is the biggest myth that has to be debunked, no matter where we are in the globe, right? And you hear it. You just hear, you'll know when you have dialogue, whether somebody's talking about the BIM process or how I'm doing Revit. And I want to say sometimes, if you want to talk to me about Revit, say, Brent, I want to have a Revit dialogue. And then my brain will go Revit and we'll be good. But don't say, let's talk about BIM. And then I've got an instance parameter and catalog types and these types of families. We're not talking about BIM. We're talking about the confines of the level of Revit. So, and then I just gave some, and actually some examples here. Learning Revit means learning BIM. I can't do BIM because there's no Revit on my machine. The RFP said to do BIM. And I'd say, oh, so this image I think is one of the most awesome BIM images because, you know, as in quote architect by trade, I don't see anything in there that I would design, but that's all BIM. So, you know, I won't read through all of these just for the sake of time, but it's this civil engineers, assuming BIM doesn't apply to them. And that I had to do a lot of work on because IBI, we do transportation, transit planning, infrastructure projects, linear piping. And in my world, coming from CH2M Hill, that's where I started BIM. So when I go out in the industry, I have to be very cognizant of the fact that these first two myths are rampant. BIM is for architects and BIM is equal to Revit. So know that when you have your dialogue, right? And with your owners as well, because they don't think that way when they hear BIM. BIM is different from SIM and BRIM, and if you've heard in the industry, and I've seen this, this is only a sampling of the IM acronyms, and like PIM being piping and plant, and I've heard process information, project information. Like, oh my God, we just got to stop doing this. BIM is BIM. It's information modeling. It's the processes we described. So I've seen that a lot. BIM is just buildings because it has the word building in it, right? But no, it's the process, again, the verb of creating information-rich models. So I threw this up here. And if you think of the world of assets, the virtual representation of the physical object, everything you see here, and you were asking about, if you look at what you see here, so if you can see my mouse moving, this is Revit, this is EcoSim, this is Inroads, this is, I believe it was Revit with Recap. This is Civil 3D. This was, I think, Aviva PDMS or Intergraph Smart Plant. SketchUp. Oh, I believe that was Bentley's EcoSim or EcoSim and OpenPlant. And then this was Bentley's Smart Plant PNID.
Can SketchUp be used for BIM?
Yeah, that's why I put that in there. It's been my biggest struggle. So for years I've said no, and then all of a sudden SketchUp built IFC compatibility. So it's a struggle there because I can go SketchUp to an IFC file, and by definition of getting to an IFC, I have delineation of walls, doors, and windows and stuff like that. So I cringe. It'll get better. I think we're gonna, because they're smart, right? They know, like if they kept it as a sketch, it would fail, right? Oops, can you guys still hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can.
So, okay, cool. So as of now, the answer is yes. It'll get, yes with an asterisk. It'll just get better and better. CAD being just AutoCAD, I've had that too. We can't do this project. We do it in CAD. And I'd say MicroStation, and I would irk a lot of people. So, you know, it's the big myth. The misconception there is CAD was never AutoCAD. CAD was actually a process that went through design, construction, and operations as well, but limited to 2D digitized drafting, very kind of similar to what we do in the BIM world today. MicroStation is BIM, is something I've heard as well. MicroStation is a 2D CAD platform, and I have it here side by side, AutoCAD and MicroStation. Same stuff, different wrapper. And I can only say, and my favorite, and it's funny because I grew up, I learned AutoCAD first. I went to CH2M Hill, I learned MicroStation, and you learn things like MicroStation deals with paper space differently. Or when I dimension in AutoCAD, it's point, locate your dimension line. Your dimension in MicroStation, it's first point, locate your dimension line, second point. And you sit there as a cat in a 2D CAD world saying, that's stupid, why is it different? But at the end of the day, it's a dimension, it just does it differently. Same thing, different wrapper. Bentley has no BIM, I've heard that as well. So if you're unfamiliar with the world of Bentley, it'll be, as we progress, one of the assignments, I actually force you to say, hey, look, X is going to be designed using Bentley. What do we do as a BIM manager? Your first question might be, what's Bentley? So go to bentley.com. It's got a whole host of everything. So right in here are Bentley's Revit equivalents. You can design anything in the Bentley world. The beauty of Bentley, and this coming from it, one file format for all of this stuff. So if I'm in my building and I want to reference the pipes that are going under my building or reference the terrain that's around my building, I just reference it. I set up an XREF and away I go. Can't say the same in the Autodesk world. BIM is expensive, and this has caused a lot of dialogue. And I say, BIM costs nothing. Stop saying it's expensive. Okay? The scope of BIM, you know, you've got to make sure you have the right people. So we'll train staff. Training is training. We've got to do that anyway. I always come to this portion here. As an architect, if I'm doing this in 2D CAD versus a BIM application, here I'm placing it and I'm getting this. And there's just all of the stuff that comes with it. So stop saying it. It makes what I have to do more efficient. But then the other myth is if I'm doing BIM, I got to do more. No. Control your scope. Remember scope, schedule, budget. Remember what I'm BIMing and why I'm BIMing it. And then be cognizant, and this is what we'll get into dialogue later in the class about, or in the weeks in the course about, am I design build, design bid build? Do we have contractors? Does the client or the owner force stuff to us? Does the RFP ask for things? And I have one of the exercises, I threw some RFPs up there saying, have a look and tell me what you think might be concerning. See what you guys discern out of those RFPs. That's where you start to see the scope. Then that leads to, we are doing BIM. Oh, it's expensive because it's depleting our budget. And then that's where we fail from a project delivery. The fact is, if we must increase our scope, we must address and adjust schedule and budget. So the idea is, if the RFP says, not only do I want you to do what you need to do as an architect, but regular clash detection, schedule the meetings, etc. Well, we've got a plan for that. We've got to do all of these BIM items. Don't assume they're going to get done. We have to account for it. If we're asked to do a higher level of detail, or to make sure that our models can feed a higher level of detail, there could be a requirement there. And then plan accordingly. Okay? And I won't do all, there'll be a lot more. There's no support for BIM. I'll skip, like this is an IBI thing, but most organizations that are doing BIM, they'll have the champion. And that's the point here. This is IBI internal stuff, but at the end of the day, if you're doing BIM and you don't have a BIM coordinator, well, you just made a mistake there. So we've got to connect that. These last two are interesting. I've heard, well, we can't do BIM because the client either doesn't want it or requires MicroStation or AutoCAD. And I've tried to stress to them, you can create and author content however you choose. You could have one or more of these modes of delivery. So you were asking earlier, how do we get data out? Sometimes it depends on what we're delivering, what the requirements are, what the integrations are, or things that we had to feed as outputs, Excel, Access, SQL, or others. So it could vary, and there's nothing that's standard. I'm going to just stress right over here, the symbol of open BIM interoperability. That is a hugely important aspect of bringing the international world together of BIM. BIM hinders concept design. Chuckle at that one too, because you could start with this, end up in the BIM world, in the same way we'd end up in the CAD world, or you could start with any one of these. And when I put this slide, and I don't remember which is from what, but you know, you've got your Revit, concept Revit, you've got your SketchUp, generative component, this is SketchUp, generative components, Rhino plus Grasshopper. I don't care how you do concept. We have a workflow to go from the easily facilitated conceptual massing, have fun as an architect or an engineer, to a more defined, prescribed workflow of authoring rich, intelligent data. And then the last one, the BIM lead is a new role, and I would say not true. Somebody was leading the digital representation of our stuff for decades. Now it's wrapped in the term BIM, doesn't make it new. The scope has increased. We still need people to follow and respect it. So that one, I thought it was interesting after I asked you guys to do it. I said, you know what, I'm going to do this internally for us. So that's it. That's all I really wanted to cover this week. Any closing questions or comments on week 1?
Yeah. Just to circle back to Bentley there, you said you can pretty much do it all in that. Does that mean like the files are able to be much larger than Revit?
It's interesting that the files, so you can do everything. The biggest difference is the Bentley applications are not central models. So it's a 100% federated approach. So imagine in Revit, and I know in the Revit, I have a lot of fun with Revit, but imagine in Revit if you're strictly adhering to work sets, strictly, no element borrowing. Now, that's been a debate in itself. But if we had strict work sets, and I would check out the work set, lock it, I'm working on it, you're not. Okay? The world of Bentley is take those work sets and make them different files. So there's none of that. Everybody's in the same bucket, the big bucket of Revit, I call it. Then the other benefit that DGN has over Revit or AutoCAD is when I link something or do an XREF or whatever the reference together, the data flows through. So in Revit, when you link a Revit model, you get kind of like the blob, or you link a CAD file, it's a movable blob. In Bentley, if I link structural into architectural, I can actually make cuts in my architectural based on linked elements from structural, and I can do full data reporting, structural links in my door, and they can puncture their wall, and all of that that internal talking occurs, unlike on the Autodesk side. But a lot of people haven't experienced that. So yeah, so the short answer to what you said is the file sizes are controlled by full federation, and then that ability to talk is built in.
So in other words, I should go learn Bentley this year.
It's funny. A lot of my internal BIM coordinators, I say that, they say that to me. They go, well, why do we do Revit? I said, well, it's the market share. I can't, all of our major projects, contractors, they'll all most likely Revit capable. So that's the thing. Having Bentley in your toolkit would make you powerful. That would be my message to you. But if you don't have Revit, you're doing yourself a discourse. So you need Revit. If you learn Bentley, that would be pretty slick. All right.
Cool.
Mm.
So going into next week, so I've already opened up week 2 for you guys. Just have a look. I'm just the hybrid portion. So again, it's looking at creating a matrix to just look at what uses would be associated to which disciplines in the life cycle. And then we're looking at the EIRs. So I don't want to, whatever you dream up is right. I think that's the message to you, okay? Let me just leave it like that. So when you get into it, my email is the best way to get in touch with the Algonquin email. I have it on my phone. If you want, I think I left my cell number if you want to text me, but the best is the Algonquin email. Fire me messages, Brent, I've looked, good Lord, I don't know what you want me to do, or is this the right track, or just be confident. And as you saw here, it's about generating the dialogue, and then we'll see where that leads us. I'll have the discussion, so you'll see then the presentation, and I think I have it online anyway. If you have to see, hey, what am I going to be talking about? It's there. But I'd recommend just, I want to see your interpretation of what you would come to if you look at the BIM execution, the Penn State plan, look at all the BIM uses, and then dream up in the design world. Who does it apply to? Arch, engineer, contractor, or owner? Who? Just get your thoughts on there, and then we have the dialogue. And then the same with the EIR. Think of, if you were an owner, what would I ask for? If on the table, don't care if I know everything about BIM, what would I ask for if somebody was designing my house or my building? What would be of benefit? And then see where that leads you. Cool?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
All right, guys. And what I'll do is on the announcements, I'll post a link to this presentation so for those who missed it. And yeah, and then, oh, do we have more attendees? We have 5 attendees online right now. I didn't even notice that. So is everybody else on? Oh, they're all muted. Oh my God, I didn't even know. Okay, I'm unmuting everybody else. Sorry, everybody else who's made it on, were you guys all here the whole time? Amit, Ravi, and Sugandra, are you guys all on right now?
Yep.
That's awesome. I apologize. So I have not been looking at the control panel since we started. So welcome. So now we're at the end. I have recorded the whole thing just for the sake of time. I'm not going to go and revisit intros and all of that. Maybe we'll start the next session just with some student intros. But so since everybody is on, this is great. I will post the video. Please, please, please. The webinar link. Go to it. Register for the webinar. Get it in your calendar. This is the mean. This is the only mechanism I have to deliver the live virtual class. And then, yeah, this is great that you guys all made it on here, and we'll all be here for the next one. And what I'll do is when you come on, I'll unmute everybody so that, it's just the live interactive dialogue. Unfortunately, you automatically came unmuted and I didn't notice once we started going. So that sound good for everybody? I know you have the next class at 6, so I don't want to hold you guys longer than we need to. But if there's any other, from the rest of you, any other closing thoughts or comments?
I'm good. Thank you so much.
Awesome. If you can, for those who just came on though, I don't know if I have to show if there's any auditing that comes out, but if you can, go back into the week 1 portion on the hybrid side, the online learning, go in and just enter some BIM myths from your perspective and your introductions, and then at least you're recorded as entering something. So if somebody says, hey, did they complete the hybrid portion? 2 thumbs up, it's all good. And then, so if you can do that quickly, that's great. And then we'll go on to the rest. Sounds good?
Yep.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the next class, and we will reconvene 1 week from now. Oh, sorry. One other thing. I have a hard conflict on the 29th of September because I'm at the Canada BIM Council presenting live, and on the 1st of December we have a scheduled family vacation. So what I'm going to do is send out a doodle asking for just, if you guys, because it's all web-based, some options to reschedule those 2 classes, and we'll just pick the best one and I'll shift that webinar accordingly. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, and I'll give a lot of options. I'll be flexible, whatever works out. So, okay. With that, thank you all. Have fun, and we'll talk next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.